want you to think about July 7, 2026,
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta Stadium. If you look up the official records for that day, you see a story written in ink that supposedly won't ever fade.
The FIFA World Cup 2026, round of 16, Argentina 3, Egypt 2.
Today's deep dive is going to dig far, far beneath that 3-2 scoreline. To do this, we are pulling from a few different sources. We're looking at the official FIFA match reports, the formal statements issued by the Egyptian Football Association, and, most importantly, a deeply compelling investigative piece written by Coach Hesham.
Yeah, Coach Hesham's work here is vital.
It really is. Because reading Hesham's account, you start to realize that while the record books are going to keep that final score forever, they might never truly understand the mechanics of how it was engineered.
To understand Hesham's argument, we first have to unearth the structure that Egypt actually built on that pitch. We really need to set the scene, because the context is everything. You have this massive collision of farewells.
Right.
On one side, Lionel Messi. He's 39 years old, defending the crown he finally seized in Qatar after chasing it for 2 decades.
The absolute peak of football royalty.
Yes, and on the other side, you have Mohamed Salah, 34 years old, the undisputed king of Egyptian football, playing what everyone in that sweltering stadium understood to be his final World Cup match.
Wow.
These are 2 men who fundamentally redefined what their respective nations believed was possible. They're meeting for the last time, and, well, only one gets to advance.
The pre-match commentary treated Egypt largely as an afterthought. It was your classic, quaint underdog narrative.
Mm-hmm.
But reading through the tactical breakdown in Hesham's piece, I really want to push back on that David and Goliath cliche.
Yeah, it doesn't really fit here.
No, because Egypt didn't show up hoping to get a lucky shot with a slingshot. They essentially threw the slingshot away, stepped into the center of the ring, and structurally out-wrestled the giant. How exactly did they do that? Because they didn't just park the bus, right?
No, they absolutely didn't. And often, when a smaller footballing nation plays a giant, they use what's called a low block.
Just putting everyone behind the ball.
Right, putting all their players near their own penalty area and just praying for a 0-0 draw. But Egypt deployed a highly aggressive mid-block. They actively suppressed Argentina's midfield. They choked off the passing lanes to Enzo Fernandez and Alexis McAllister.
Wow. So they took the game to them.
By doing that, they forced Argentina to play the ball out wide into areas where Egypt actually had numerical superiority. It was, quite frankly, a tactical masterclass.
And that tactical dominance materialized incredibly quickly, didn't it? 15 minutes in, Egypt completely hushes the continent. A delivery comes into the box, and Yasser Ibrahim, a center back who plays domestically for Al Ahly, a name largely unknown to the global audience, rises up over the world champions and heads the Pharaohs in front. But the aristocracy of the sport, they usually find a way to reassert themselves. And Argentina's response arrived quickly in a very familiar package. Nicolas Tagliafico goes down in the box under a challenge from Hesam Hassan. The referee points to the spot. Penalty to Argentina. Which brings Lionel Messi to the penalty spot. And you can feel the oxygen just vanish from the arena. But this is where the young Egyptian goalkeeper, Mustafa Choubert, cements his legend. He dives to his left, and he pushes Messi's penalty away.
What's fascinating here is the psychological mechanics of that specific save. When a goalkeeper saves a penalty against a player of Messi's stature, it physically alters the geometry of the game.
Wait, what do you mean by that? How does it alter the geometry?
Well, goalkeepers talk about this phenomenon where, after a massive save, the goal essentially shrinks in the minds of the opposing striker.
Wow.
Yeah, Choubert didn't just stop a penalty, he built a psychological wall. He proceeded to deny McAllister. He denied Julian Alvarez on follow-up chances. By halftime, he appeared to fill the net entirely. Because of Chaubert's presence, Egypt walked into the dressing room leading the world champions 1-0. And the tactical data backs up that they absolutely deserve to be there.
So they have the lead, they have the tactical blueprint, and they have the momentum. But here's the central question of Hesham's entire investigation. How do you dismantle a monument once the underdog has built it?
Right.
You don't necessarily do it with a sledgehammer. You do it with a scalpel. Which brings us to the 59th minute.
The true hinge of history for this match.
Egypt breaks on a counterattack. And the mechanics of this counter are just beautiful. Salah uses his own gravity, the fact that he's Mohamed Salah, to draw 2 defenders toward him. He slips a perfectly timed ball to Mustafa Zico.
Right in stride.
Zico takes it in stride, the finish is impossibly clean, and the net ripples. Zico tears off his shirt. The stadium erupts. For one delirious minute, Egypt leads 2-0.
But then the referee touches his earpiece. The invisible hand of VAR, the video assistant referee, reaches down from the booth.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and I have to admit, I'm genuinely confused by how the rules were applied here.
Yeah, it's highly controversial.
The video assistants went far, far back into the buildup of the play. They combed through the footage frame by frame, and they found a moment of contact on Argentina's Lisandro Martinez near the halfway line. And just like that, they unwrite the goal. They erase it from reality. How does the rulebook actually define a buildup? Because it felt like they were digging up fossils to find a foul.
That is precisely the core of the controversy. The IFAB rules, which govern world football, state that VAR can review an attacking possession phase, or APP, leading up to a goal.
Okay, an APP, what exactly does that entail?
The APP is supposed to be the immediate, continuous phase of play that results in the goal. But the interpretation of when a phase begins and ends is highly subjective.
Very subjective.
Did the opposing team have a chance to reset? Did the ball change possession? Hesham argues that the refereeing crew stretched the definition of the APP to its absolute breaking point, going back multiple phases of play just to find an infraction. And it raises a profound structural question. Hesham asks, who benefits when the record is rewritten like this? Why is it that whenever a smaller nation achieves the miraculous, the bureaucratic systems governing the sport so often manage to find a technicality to erase their triumph?
He makes a really heavy accusation there.
He does.
Now, FIFA and the proponents of VAR would argue that technology is just there to ensure the absolute correct decision is made, regardless of the narrative. But Hesham's point is that the application of the technology is subjective. When you come through high-definition, slow-motion footage for long enough, you will always find a foul somewhere.
Exactly. And the Egyptian players recognized this instantly. But what defines this specific team is their reaction to that erasure. They didn't collapse into despair.
No, they doubled down, which is incredible given the physical toll.
Right. In the 67th minute, Hysam Hassan goes on a sprint of pure conviction down the right wing. And we have to factor in the biology here. This is deep into their fourth match in 3 weeks.
They had to be exhausted.
The lactic acid buildup, the sheer muscular exhaustion for a team lacking deep rotational reserves, it must have been agonizing. But Hassan finds Zico again, and Zico finishes it again, emphatically.
2-0. And this time, there is no technicality for the screens to find. The champions of the world are losing on pure merit to a nation that had never before won a knockout match in its entire history.
But holding truth to power, especially on a global stage, comes with immense friction. As the clock crawled toward 90 minutes, the atmosphere in Atlanta began to shift. What happened next? The 13-minute collapse.
The referee begins issuing yellow cards. But according to Hesham's breakdown, they are falling almost exclusively in a single direction.
Yes.
Chaubert, the young hero in goal, is booked. Hamdi Fathi is booked. Marwan Attia is booked.
Even Hysam Hassan, Egypt's fiercely competitive coach on the touchline, is shown a yellow card for protesting. It fractures Egypt's rhythm, caution by caution.
Now, if I'm playing devil's advocate here, couldn't this just be the natural result of fatigue? When players get tired, they get sloppy, they make late tackles. Couldn't the disparity in yellow cards just be the biological reality of an exhausted team trying to hold off the world champions?
It's a crucial question to ask. Fatigue certainly plays a role. But Hesham contrasts the typical fouls you see from tired legs, shirt pulls, late lunges, with the specific nature of the calls being made here.
Right.
He argues that 50-50 challenges were consistently awarded to Argentina, effectively altering the gravity of the pitch. He calls it a tilted arena. It wasn't just that Egypt was tired, it was that the structural weight of the officiating was compounding that exhaustion, denying them any opportunity to relieve the pressure.
And when you tilt the arena against a team running on fumes, the floodwaters eventually break through. In the 79th minute, Messi curls a cross in, and Christian Romero bundles it home. It's 2-1, and suddenly the pressure becomes just suffocating.
And this brings us to the underlying economics of modern international football. In the 83rd minute, Argentina brings on Gonzalo Montiel as a substitute.
We have to talk about the benches, because this isn't just about the 11 guys on the field.
Precisely. Argentina possesses a gilded bench. They have the resources to summon fresh-legged Champions League caliber reinforcements at will. Egypt, conversely, is relying on a squad assembled largely from their domestic league.
It's a huge difference.
The physiological disparity in the 85th minute of a World Cup knockout match is staggering. Montiel comes on, pulls the ball back, and Messi meets it with a half volley. It's his 21st World Cup goal. It's 2-2.
The momentum is entirely gone. The knife just turns. But even then, Egypt bends without fully breaking. Stoppage time arrives. The score is level. Extra time is beckoning, which would at least give Egypt a moment to breathe, hydrate, and reset tactically.
But that sanctuary never arrives.
No.
Because in the 92nd minute, another Argentine substitute, Lautaro Martinez, crosses the ball, and Enzo Fernandez rises to head the winner, 3-2.
Just devastating.
And there is a profound, almost cosmic irony to that final goal.
What's that?
That stoppage time winner by Fernandez was officially recorded by FIFA as the 3,000th goal in World Cup history.
Wow, really?
Yeah. It becomes a monumental, historical milestone, celebrated globally, scored against a team that had just spent 2 hours trying to write a history of its own. The whistle blows, and the official record is sealed.
So when we step back and look at the ledger, when we evaluate Haitian's investigation against the official FIFA box score, what are we actually looking at? Because the numbers tell a very different story than the broadcast did.
The statistical footprint of the game is deeply revealing. Argentina dominated possession with 57%. They generated 19 attempts on goal compared to Egypt's 5. On paper, that looks like a dominant team eventually wearing down an inferior opponent.
But the context of those numbers is what Haitian was excavating.
Exactly. Because Egypt scored from 2 of those 5 chances and had a flawless third erased by a highly subjective, retroactive video review. When you synthesize the data, Haitian's core thesis emerges. The world champions didn't orchestrate a heroic comeback. They required a soft penalty, a highly debated VAR reprieve, a statistical anomaly in the distribution of fouls, the absolute full depth of a multi-million-dollar bench, and a stoppage time header just to survive a team of domestic league players.
Right. When the dust finally settled in Atlanta, the visual contrast was absolutely stark. You have Messi in tears, hoisted onto the shoulders of his teammates, and you can see the profound relief on their faces. They knew exactly how close they came to the abyss. And then on the other side of the pitch, you have Mohamed Salah.
Standing completely motionless near the center circle.
Right, just staring at nothing. He's absorbing the reality that the greatest footballing career his country has ever produced has ended. But if you accept Haitian's premise, it didn't end in a fair defeat. It ended in a dispossession.
And that feeling of dispossession wasn't just limited to the players on the field or the journalists in the press box. The very next day, on July 8th, the Egyptian Football Association issued a formal, scathing statement.
I read that, yeah.
They explicitly condemned the officiating and the specific application of VAR during the match. They stated on the record that the decisive moments raised fundamental questions about consistency and fairness in the sport's governance.
Now, it is very easy for neutral observers or fans to wave that statement away, to call it sour grapes from a losing federation. But Haitian's investigation asks us to look at the tape.
We have to look at what Egypt actually achieved that afternoon. Because despite the final score, this wasn't just an ending for Salah, it was an announcement for the nation.
How so?
Because for 79 minutes, Egypt completely shattered the illusion of the global hierarchy. They weren't just plucky, they didn't rely on luck, they were better organized, tactically superior, more clinical, and vastly more courageous than the reigning champions of the world.
Yeah.
Mustafa Choubert proved that a young goalkeeper could stare down the greatest player in history and win the psychological battle. Coach Hossam Hassan proved that tactical ingenuity can neutralize a massive disparity in financial resources.
They prove that the monolith can bleed.
Precisely. And most importantly, an entire generation of Egyptian children watched their domestic players push Messi's Argentina into a state of absolute existential panic deep into a World Cup knockout match. They learned that the ceiling they were always told existed for African and Arab nations, it is an illusion.
The ceiling does not exist. Nations build their futures on believing in that exact premise. They don't build their futures just by advancing through a tournament bracket. They build them by seeing proof of concept. The scoreboard, that official record printed in indelible ink, says Argentina won. But history, the real history, the kind we excavate and examine piece by piece, suggests something far more complicated.
It certainly does.
History should record that Egypt simply ran out of time before Argentina ran out of systemic excuses.
The official story is always going to be the most comfortable one. It preserves the status quo. But investigations like this demand that we look deeper at the mechanisms that produce those stories.
They do. And it leaves you with one final, lingering question to mull over long after the stadium lights have turned off. If a thrilling 3-2 victory on the world's biggest stage can so effectively, so thoroughly mask what critics are calling a systemic robbery, what other official histories have we blindly accepted without ever asking for the receipts? What happens to the soul of a sport when its most magnificent organic upsets are quietly, surgically erased by the very technological systems that were supposedly introduced to protect it. The monuments are massive, but you have to keep questioning the record, keep digging beneath the turf, because the truth is very rarely what is printed in gold.